I was supposed to be halfway to Portland by noon, feet tucked under the airplane seat, and my sister waiting with that impatient holiday grin she always wore when the lake house was fully stocked for winter. Instead, I found myself creeping back up my own driveway, the sky dimming behind me like a curtain closing. Of all ridiculous things, I had forgotten Arthur's original will, the real one, locked in a folder I never touched unless absolutely necessary. I kept a copy in the desk drawer, but the original, that carried weight, signatures, intent, I couldn't leave it behind. I told myself I'd be inside for 5 minutes, 10 max, grab the folder, check the thermostat, head back to the airport. But the moment I pushed the front door open, every part of me went still. No warmth, no familiar hum, just a silence that felt suspiciously rehearsed. I didn't announce myself, didn't drop my keys in the wooden bowl by the entryway like I had every day for 20 years. Something inside my chest pressed down, quiet and heavy. I moved along the hallway, feet grazing the wood floor. Then I heard them, 2 low voices coming from the study. Careful voices. Intentional voices. "If she's showing signs, we can file early," one of them said. Grant, my only son, the boy I raised alone after Arthur's first heart scare. The man who told everyone he was just helping Mom stay organized. The second voice belonged to someone I barely tolerated, Ashby, the lawyer Grant dragged into our lives after Arthur passed. "She's 74, he replied calmly. "Diminished capacity can be established with the right documentation." My breath shortened. I stayed hidden behind the archway, pressing myself flat against the wall. The conversation unfolded like a trap being set in slow motion. Grant continued, "I've already made a list, missed dates, repeated stories, misplaced items. It won't be difficult." Misplaced items, repeated stories. The same son I worked double shifts for. The same son I defended during every scraped knee, poor grade, teenage disaster season. Now cataloging me like a suspect in his own case. I swallowed hard and eased backward before the floorboards betrayed me. I stepped outside into the afternoon sun, but it might as well have been ice. I sat in my car with the keys still tight in my hand, staring ahead as if the windshield were a blank page I couldn't read yet. It wasn't the betrayal that struck hardest. It was the recognition, deep and immediate, that a part of me had known this moment was coming long before I allowed myself to admit it, and that realization was the spark that changed everything. You want to know what I did next? I didn't go to the airport. I didn't call anyone. I drove straight into my past, and that's where this story truly begins. I didn't have a destination in mind when I pulled out of the driveway, only the instinct to move, to get distance between myself and the echo of my son's voice treating me like a task to be completed. The airport exit slipped past on my right. I didn't even glance at it. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, but something inside me had shifted into a new alignment, colder and sharper than grief. I let the old parts of the city guide me, the roads I used before GPS existed, the shortcuts Arthur swore were faster even when they weren't. Without fully choosing, I ended up in front of a bakery so old it should have been condemned or turned into condos years ago. This place had survived time. I wondered if I had. Inside, a young barista with more piercings than sense welcomed me, but I barely heard her. I slid into a small table by the window, the same corner where Arthur once spread out blueprints pretending he wasn't working on weekends. I ordered a coffee I didn't really want and wrapped my fingers around the cup for warmth my chest couldn't find. My eyes traced the sidewalk outside, watching people hurry along, bundled up against the winter air. And for a moment, I remembered Grant as a child in this same spot. He used to sit across from me, elbows on the table, building tiny towers out of sugar packets. That boy had been curious, gentle, hungry for knowledge, not power. Where had the shift happened? not in a single moment. No, this kind of change grows slowly, quiet and steady, like rust under paint. I started piecing together old memories with new clarity. The year he insisted on taking full control of Arthur's estate. The way he replaced my accountant without giving me a choice. The constant "Mom, let me handle that," which had once sounded protective, but now felt like erasure masquerading as kindness. I took a slow sip of the coffee. Bitter. Fitting. It became painfully clear I had been giving him the benefit of the doubt long after he stopped earning it. Grief can make you trust the wrong people. So can loneliness. I had been both for years. When I finally stepped out of the bakery, the gray sky felt heavier, but I wasn't afraid of it. I zipped up my coat, inhaled deeply, and made a silent promise to myself. Whatever game Grant thought he was playing, he wasn't the only one capable of strategy. And that's why, instead of going home, I drove to a place I hadn't set foot in since retiring. The one place where I knew I could find answers hidden in plain sight. I parked behind the public library the way I used to when I still had keys to the archives wing. The lot was almost empty, the late afternoon light already thinning as winter pressed in. Muscle memory guided me into the exact spot I favored years ago, back when I spent more time among documents than people. Those days had made me sharp, precise, capable. I had forgotten that part of myself, or maybe I had let it go quiet. Inside, the building smelled the same as it always had: ink, dust, and the stubborn scent of old wood that refuses to leave no matter how many remodels you do. They'd replaced the carpets and upgraded the checkout stations, but the soul of the place was unchanged. It welcomed me like an old colleague who wasn't surprised I'd returned. I walked past the fiction aisles and straight toward the archives room, the one space where the truth couldn't be buried under performance or polite lies. A young staffer at the desk looked up when I entered. She didn't recognize me, but she didn't question me either. I told her I needed to review a document I once cataloged, my husband's will. She handed me a clipboard, no hesitation. People rarely challenge someone who moves with purpose. The folder was right where it should be, tucked into a row of alphabetized files. My hands didn't tremble as I opened it. Arthur's handwriting greeted me like a familiar voice, small, sharp notes scribbled in margins, arrows connecting ideas, abbreviations that would have made no sense to anyone but the two of us. He'd always believed clarity was a kindness. Funny how that became truer after his death. I went through each page slowly, not looking for edits, looking for intention. And I found it. A sticky note, yellowed around the edges, the ink slightly smudged. Arthur had written, "If you're ever unsure, trust the numbers." Underneath, he'd drawn a small column chart dividing assets and responsibilities. Beside my name, he'd written, "D retains full authority unless medically unable." There was no ambiguity, no loophole for Grant to exploit. A warmth spread through my chest, not comfort, but confirmation. Arthur had trusted me to remain myself, to stay grounded even when life tried shaking me loose. I had forgotten that, but the paper reminded me. I took out a notepad and made a list. Request certified copies, secure independent legal counsel, audit recent financial changes, document everything. I underlined the last item twice. By the time I stepped back outside, the sky had deepened into a dark blue, the wind sharp but invigorating. I walked to my car with a certainty I hadn't felt in months. But I wasn't done preparing, and what I set in motion the next morning would be the first quiet move in a plan Grant never saw coming. The next morning, I moved with a calm slowness, not out of frailty, but intention. Every detail mattered now. I retrieved a tiny voice recorder from the drawer where I kept old interview equipment from my years at the library. The device was no larger than my thumb, the sort of thing you forget exists until you need it desperately. I slipped it into the inside seam of my coat, clicked it on, and watched the faint red light blink once before disappearing. Then I staged the house. Not dramatically, subtle things, the kind that look innocent to a stranger and concerning to a manipulator. I left the kettle slightly ajar on the stove. A spoon sat on the counter instead of the drawer. A crossword puzzle lay half-finished on the table with the pen uncapped. These weren't signs of decline. They were bait for someone eager to believe I was slipping. At 10:30 sharp, I heard Grant's car rolling up the driveway. He didn't knock. He rarely did anymore. He walked inside with a grocery bag in hand, wearing that gentle, rehearsed expression I used to mistake for affection. Today, I saw it for what it was, strategy disguised as concern. "Mom, you left the porch light on again," he said softly, as if reporting a symptom. I pulled my robe tighter and gave him a tired smile. "Oh, did I?" He unpacked the groceries, soup, bread, crackers, moving around the kitchen like an inspector rather than a son. He glanced at the pill organizer by the sink. He scanned the unopened mail. He commented on how chilly the house felt. I let my responses wander, drifting off mid-sentence once or twice, just enough for him to think he was documenting evidence. At lunch, he brought up options: care homes with music therapy, private rooms, staff trained to help people in my stage of life. His voice softened on the word stage like he was doing me a kindness. I looked down at my soup and let my spoon clatter against the bowl. When he offered to take over my upcoming bills, just to lighten the mental load, I let out a small, uncertain laugh. Maybe that would help. His eyes lit with a satisfaction he didn't bother hiding. He left an hour later, confident he was gathering material for whatever case he intended to build. He didn't know every word had been captured, cataloged, archived. Once the door closed, I retrieved the recorder and placed it on my desk. It felt heavy, not physically, but with meaning. This wasn't just evidence. It was the first piece of a truth he couldn't edit or reinterpret. And that recording, it was only the beginning. The next call I made would turn the tide and bring someone into the story who knew exactly how to fight back. I didn't waste time after Grant's carefully staged visit. The moment the house settled into silence again, I went digging through a drawer I hadn't opened in years, a boxy old Rolodex with curled edges and faded ink labels. Inside it, wedged between long, outdated contacts, was the number I needed: Marlene Warren. Former colleague, former friend, sharp enough to cut through any lie, and, more importantly, someone who had no patience for manipulation. I called immediately. The message I left was brief: "I need legal guidance. It's personal and urgent." My voice didn't shake. I wouldn't let it. She texted back within an hour. 4 o'clock. "I'm coming to you." When she arrived, she didn't bother with pleasantries. She stepped inside, removed her gloves, and looked at me like she had already guessed half the story. Marlene had always been that way, one step ahead, and interested in small talk, and impossible to deceive. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured chamomile tea because it was the only thing my hands knew how to make without thinking. She didn't touch hers. Instead, she said, "Tell me everything." I didn't need to. I slid the recorder across the table, pressed play, and let Grant's voice speak for itself. The suggestion of guardianship, the subtle probing, the patronizing tone, the assumption of weakness he thought I couldn't hear in real time. Marlene's face remained unchanged through the entire recording, but her jaw tightened once, just once. When it ended, she closed her laptop, took a deep breath, and said, "He's building a case. We'll dismantle it." She moved with speed and clarity I had forgotten I admired. Within minutes, she asked for every legal document I had: power of attorney, insurance records, Arthur's old estate notes. She spread everything across the table, creating order out of chaos with the efficiency of someone who'd seen too many families collapse under quieter versions of the same betrayal. Then she began outlining a plan. First, revoke Grant's power of attorney immediately. Second, create a new will, signed and witnessed, eliminating any ambiguity. Third, secure medical records proving cognitive stability. Fourth, document every interaction going forward. Fifth, copy everything twice. "This isn't war," she said, typing furiously. "It's insulation." She helped me set up encrypted digital storage, organized my files, and created a folder labeled simply DW, Private Legal. She instructed me on what to update, what to store, and what to keep ready at a moment's notice. Before she left, she slid a single sheet toward me, the formal revocation of Grant's authority. I signed it with a steady hand. "You're not powerless," she said. "You've just been quiet." Quiet didn't mean passive, and the next steps I took would prove that better than anything Grant expected. The next morning, I moved with purpose I hadn't felt since the archives. Marlene had left detailed instructions. Every interaction, every document, every transaction needed to be meticulously recorded. I didn't just follow the plan. I became a predator in slow motion, and Grant was the unwitting prey. I started small. Calls to banks, credit institutions, and investment firms. Each conversation was precise, leaving nothing to misinterpret. I confirmed my authority, logged every word, noted every hesitation on the other end. Marlene had reminded me, bureaucracy isn't a lie if you wield it properly. By noon, I was ready for a test. I knew Grant would show up eventually, eager to check his progress. When the tires crunched over the driveway gravel, I didn't flinch. He walked in, casual, confident, the same rehearsed gentleness in his voice. "Mom, I thought we could review your bills together," he said. I smiled faintly, calmly, and gestured to the kitchen. "Sure, let's do that." But this time, I had a stack of papers, each one marked with dates, annotations, and discrepancies. Each line was evidence, transactions that had been altered, missed signatures, and notes from financial advisors confirming my authority. His eyes flicked over the documents, a subtle shift in expression I hadn't seen before. Confidence wavered. His voice, usually smooth, became clipped. "Where did you get these?" "From your own adjustments," I replied evenly. I double-checked everything with Marlene. For the first time, he faltered. He tried to argue, to inject charm, but it fell flat. I remained calm, patient. My voice recorder, discreet in my coat pocket, captured every word. By mid-afternoon, I escalated carefully. I called Marlene, who arrived within an hour. Together, we confronted Grant with a formal letter revoking all his previously assumed authority and outlining the legal consequences should he attempt to bypass it. He stood there, stunned, his carefully constructed mask slipping. The childlike arrogance that had once made me doubt myself was gone. Now, he realized fully the scope of his miscalculation. I let him stew in the silence, absorbing every second of his panic. Then I spoke, quiet but firm. "Arthur trusted me, Grant. I've never been incapable. And now you've overstepped." He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed, and finally left, this time, not with triumph, but with fear. By evening, the house felt lighter. The cold winter sun had dipped behind gray clouds, but inside, there was a warmth I hadn't recognized in months. Control. Not anger. Not revenge. Control. And yet, I knew this wasn't the end. Grant would push, test boundaries. The next move would require every bit of patience and cunning I had left. Grant didn't speak to me for 2 days, but I knew he was watching, calculating, waiting for me to slip. I didn't. Every morning I reviewed my records, cross-checked accounts, and updated my notes. Every night I rehearsed what I would say if he tried another maneuver. Then it happened. A lawyer's letter arrived in the mail, addressed to me, but clearly intended to intimidate. Grant's signature was absent. He was careful, but the tone was aggressive. Thinly veiled threats about reconsidering familial obligations and legal avenues. I set the envelope aside and smiled faintly. Marlene came over immediately. We went through it line by line, annotating each overreach and writing a formal response that left no room for misinterpretation. She advised sending copies to the financial institutions and to the court if necessary. Every move was precise, preemptive. When Grant showed up that evening, it was a calculated arrival, shoes silent, eyes scanning. He carried the same casual expression as always, but I could see it cracking, like paint under pressure. "Mom," he said, voice lower, more uncertain, "I got your letter. I think there's been a misunderstanding." I gestured toward the table, where a new set of documents waited. Each one detailed his attempts to manipulate, every missignature, every suggestion he tried to pass off as care. I didn't need to speak much. The evidence was sufficient. He faltered. For the first time, the air between us shifted from tension to reckoning. He tried to justify, to explain, to charm. Each word fell flat. I let him unravel silently, letting the weight of his own actions land fully. Finally, I said, steady and calm, "Grant, I won't let fear or manipulation dictate my life. Arthur trusted me, and so will the law. You've chosen your side. Now I choose mine." His eyes widened. He tried to argue one last time, then gave a slow, reluctant nod. He left without another word. The quiet in the house afterward was absolute, almost sacred. By the time I sat down with Marlene, sipping tea we didn't need to pretend to enjoy, I realized something important. The storm had passed, not because it was over, but because I had anchored myself firmly in truth and preparation. The final step was ensuring this wouldn't happen again, and for that, I needed to take one last, decisive action. Each signature felt like a reclaiming of myself. I also sent Grant a certified letter. No threats, no accusations, just facts. My authority was reinstated. Any attempts to override it would be legally challenged, and I expected respect moving forward. Nothing personal, nothing dramatic, just unflinching clarity.